There's a number of really big challenges that organizations have in this space. And I think, one of the biggest ones is actually around pay equity. So not just gender, pay equity, but pay equity around, race, social background, disability, etc., etc. So pay inequity is a result of who sits where in the organizational tree. So the further you get up that organization, generally, the more pay and reward that you receive. And that creates this real imbalance in terms of pay and reward and the rest of it. So there's a number of things that organizations should be thinking about doing. I think some of them is clearly about representation. So getting more diversity up that organizational ladder is going to be a measure to reduce those pay gaps. I think the other thing organizations really need to have a laser focus on is the additional kind of bonus system, actually. So we often have systems where you get a percentage of your base salary, 10% of your base salary in terms of bonus. Well, if you're earning £1 million a year and you get 10% of that, that's a completely different scenario than if you're earning £10,000 a year and you're getting 10% of that. So while on the surface, that model operates on a perception of let's treat everyone the same, we know that the model of treating everyone the same from a pay perspective actually exaggerates pay inequity. So while we should be focusing, as I've said, on things like representation, I think organizations should be a bit more radical in terms of its pay, reward, benefits, all those sorts of things that go around the edges, which can help to reduce those pay gaps. One of the things that we need to start thinking about is the relationship between pay inequity and employee morale. And, obviously one of the surest ways to demotivate your colleagues is to pay them less or make them feel that their worth is less based on, who they are, their gender, their ethnicity, their sexual orientation and the rest of it. So, we do see a correlation between pay, reward, benefit systems and that psychology of, do you value me? Do you make me feel part of the team or do you make me feel other? And if you make me feel other, I'm going to start to feel demotivated, disengaged in the rest of it. And I think one of the things that organizational leaders need to think about is this dynamic. When you make people feel disengaged, demotivated, they do one of two things. Most people think, I've had enough here, I'm going to leave. So you're losing your talent. You've got this kind of like leaky pipeline and all of that, and people are starting to leave the organization. Actually, the risks around that are far greater, because actually what we know from psychology is that organizations, or rather individuals that feel demotivated, they often don't leave the organization, they stay, but they mentally check out. So what we actually have in that context is a situation where you've got people around you, but they're just here for the perceived lack of paycheck. And that's not going to help you be innovative, engaging, high performing, and, all the things that we need, from our colleagues and the rest of it. If we want to achieve pay equity, or if we want to eliminate bias from pay and reward systems, one of the ways to do that is to be transparent in pay and reward. So, for example, if you are advertising a role, if you say, we have role X and the worth of that role is Y, everybody's clear in terms of what that is. And so whoever's appointed for the role, their salary is determined based on the worth that we've established. Now, what that does is it creates transparency in the system. It creates transparency in decision making. And what it also does is it stops this kind of grey zone of negotiation. And the grey zone of negotiation is one of the surest ways where gender bias in particular, starts to live out and play out, because we know that men are much more likely to be assertive and ask for more of a kind of an uptake, in terms of a job offer or in terms of negotiations around promotions and stuff like that. And women are less likely to do that. So I think one of the things we need to do is to be transparent on what is the value of the role against the value of the grade, and have a salary based on that, as opposed to banding systems, which exaggerates the pay gap.